Today's discussion, macOS security benchmarks, and more importantly, how you can enforce them and some of our suggestions so that you can meet your auditor standards and requirements. My name's Matt Woodruff. I'm the Worldwide Security Solutions Lead as part of our worldwide business development efforts for Jamf Protect, formerly the sales engineer dedicated to the U.S. federal government here in the United States. And we also have our partner program manager joining us as well, who has helped extensively with building out our GitHub repo of our CIS security scripts and profiles. So she will be joining and available through the Q&A window if you have any questions directed at her. So thank you, Aaron, for joining us as well. Our agenda today will cover in approximately 30 minutes why these benchmarks exist, best practices in meeting them, workflows in applying those security settings, and how to be prepared for auditors. And if we can go through just a quick overview of Jamf so that you can understand just how dynamic and different we are growing and how quickly our portfolio is changing. Our goal has always been to help organizations succeed with Apple. That's through both management and protection of those endpoints as you are getting them deployed. We're able to accomplish this now because of an extensive portfolio that we continue to grow out. You may not have heard or seen our latest portfolio of devices, so let's talk through just a quick glance at Jamf Connect being this connection for your macOS devices to your cloud identity provider and validating that you are enforcing that level of authentication and identity management. In the middle, we have all of our MDM solutions, Jamf Now, Jamf Pro, and Jamf School, covering multiple facets of our products, both for the simplistic, non-IT required environments, you have Jamf Now. For the experts that have both a little bit to hundreds of thousands of devices, you have Jamf Pro for the enterprise and education markets. And then you also have our latest, one of our latest acquisitions of ZuluDesk has transitioned into our product of Jamf School. And then the product I'm focused on these days, Jamf Protect, helping you secure those macOS endpoints in your environment, all sitting upon the bed of our Jamf Nation. One of our most prized possessions because we get to open up to 100,000 fellow Apple administrators the ability for you to communicate with each other and provide that community in an online space of question and answers. So if you have any questions about any of these products, feel free to go to jamfnation.com to find those answers. Additionally, since I've been here for about 5 years, one of the things I'm so proud about is Jamf's commitment to same-day support. What that means for us is that every time Apple releases that major OS update, whether it be macOS, iOS, iPadOS, or tvOS, Jamf will be there committed to supporting that release on the same day Apple releases it, so that you're not worried about any of your management platform or your security platforms from being out of date or non-compliant to that latest operating system. That also helps you in meeting some of those guidelines that your InfoSec department might have or your government entities might have in making sure that you are applying those macOS security patches to those vulnerabilities as quickly as possible. So Jamf can be that platform offering up our history of doing this since 2012. As we're talking about security, one of those components is, why do security benchmarks exist in the first place. You might be asking yourself that question for you might not have been in this space and you're just trying to understand, why do the benchmarks exist? They're there to provide guidance, making sure that the data, the secure data, is not leaving your organization in any way. But what identifies secure data or sensitive data for you in your environment? We've identified 4 key areas. It might be intellectual property, just as Apple started out in a garage with just a very limited skeleton staff. They developed some intellectual property that they deemed sensitive to them. The same might be with you in your small organization. But IP can extend across multiple verticals and very large-scale enterprises. But it might not just be IP. You might have customer and or student data that you need to protect from hackers. For you've seen, that gets the most publicity in the media outlets today is when someone is releasing your customer data. So that is considered sensitive to you. You might be in the regulated space, whether it be healthcare, retail, credit card information, whatever it might be. You've got regulated data that you're needing to protect. And for the government agencies that might be on here and or government contractors, you have access to classified data that you are also needing to protect. So we at Jamf have come to find you will situate yourself within one of these 4 areas that is deemed sensitive data that you're wanting to protect. Thankfully, there are 4 different organizations that have come forth with guidance on how do you harden an operating system in your environment. The global efforts at the CIS, or Center for Internet Security, helps provide this security benchmarks across multiple operating systems from almost a crowdsourcing of different individuals providing guidance and placing those within a benchmark that they produce for their members. You also have DISA and NIST from the US federal government that also provides different methods of guidance, whether it be from the DISA STIGs, especially for the US Department of Defense. You also have civilian agencies looking at NIST and also enterprise organizations looking at NIST, whether it be the 800, 171, or 179, whatever it might be. NIST has some guidance available to you as well. And for our international folks on the call, you might also need to be provided guidance from the NCSC that has Cyber Essentials frameworks built out. So these are just 4 examples of different organizations that provide guidance to all of you. There are multiple different frameworks that have been built out. There's multiple different regulations that have been built out. You might have to fall within one of these or one of these particular frameworks, whether it be HIPAA and HITRUST for healthcare. You might be applying the DISA STIG because you're in the military. NCSC Cyber Essentials as a framework for both the UK and European Union, or any of these frameworks listed on your screen, you might find yourself within. And as you find yourself within these particular regulations, you will have auditors that come in and need to validate that you are securing that sensitive data. So how do you do that? What are some of the best practices that Jamf has with our global presence and knowledge and expertise? We have a few suggestions. Apple has been transitioning for quite a while, especially on the iOS and iPadOS side. They have created quite a knowledge base of settings within the MDM framework and a path to enrollment that's successful. we're thankful to see that they have also built out this same type of framework for macOS and is growing this form or this framework to enforce settings on macOS devices. So we highly suggest that you maximize the use of configuration profiles, but most of all, because it can traverse new macOS updates that are coming. Put another way, configuration profiles, when they're applied to macOS, will extend into the next version of macOS because this is the framework Apple is utilizing from this point forward. Our suggestion will also be to validate that those configuration profiles that you're setting, the settings that you're setting, is working in the latest macOS betas that are coming out. So verify against the betas. How do you get access to the betas is another component to be successful here. This is where Apple Business Manager and Apple School Manager comes into play. As your organization gets enrolled into those programs, it will grant you access to have managed Apple IDs in your organizations. As you have access to the managed Apple IDs, that leads into the Apple Seed program. Apple Seed is where you will have access to the betas. It will also grant you access to the feedback assistant available by Apple. So when you're trying or attempting to apply a security benchmark setting that you need for your organization and it's not working in a beta, we highly suggest you submit that feedback during the beta program. Another key area for you to review, especially during the beta phase, are any of the new settings, otherwise known as keys, as they are getting introduced to the betas of macOS. Therefore, test it in your environment. Test it against your network environment, your server setup. You have to validate that those keys are going to work in your organization so that you can be successful in applying your security benchmark. Last of all, supervision. Very well known on the iOS and iPadOS side of the house, getting slowly introduced to macOS, but supervision is this setting within the OS that allows it to understand, is this a corporately owned device or is this an institutionally owned device? And this supervision setting can only be set when you've enrolled your macOS device through Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager. So almost necessary these days that you at least start the process of reviewing enrollment through Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager. Additional settings. Something that Erin McDonald has been strong in her efforts to the Jamf customer base. Apply only the settings that are required for your environment. Each of the ones that provided to you by CIS, the STIGs, NIST frameworks, and or NCSC are exhaustive. You'll review hundreds of different settings. You will also find that as you implement some of them, they might be detrimental to the end user experience, therefore detrimental to end user performance. So we highly suggest that you vet every setting that has been displayed and only apply the ones that are required for you to protect your sensitive data. Because again, they are only suggestions. So you review the suggestions, you might find that you deselect some of those settings as you're applying those security benchmarks to your environment. What are some of the workflows to apply those security settings? What you'll see is that we have a few different things and items and solutions for you to enforce and report on gatekeeper firewall settings, disable and report on printer sharing or remote management settings. And these are just a few examples. As I've told you before, it's exhaustive. They include hundreds of recommendations. So let's talk about some of the perspectives of using MDM configuration profiles from this point forward to enforce those settings down onto your device. We'll give you two examples. The first is Firewall. You can see here with this screenshot, we have Jamf Pro. Jamf Pro has enforced upon a particular macOS device the requirement for the full disk encryption technology called Firewall to get enabled on every Mac it gets deployed to. But it's not only the facet of requirement of Firewall, we are also requiring that a recovery key get created. One of the additional requirements is making sure that you can unlock that Firewall technology after hibernation as well. Last of all, with any MDM server that you choose, we're thankful to say Jamf Now, Jamf Pro, and Jamf School allow you to escrow that recovery key. Because if that employee or that student or teacher leaves your organization, you have to have a means to decrypt that particular volume so that it can either be used for investigations and or be repurposed for the next user. These encryption keys are escrowed into the MDM server for viewing by the administration. Another setting, enabling Firewall. One of the additional recommendations by the CIS in 254, you'll see controlling incoming connections for specific apps is also a recommendation because you are deploying either corporately or institutionally owned apps out to the device that might have special firewall requirements to gain access to other internal resources. Therefore, controlling that through configuration profiles is highly suggested over, let's say, setting IPFW through a script. The other recommendation by CIS 255, enabling stealth mode. Validating that if the computer, the macOS device, ever receives a TCP or ICMP request, that it is essentially a ghost. It doesn't respond. Additional security setting for you to set up for each one of your Macs. So those were two examples. But let's talk about the possible future of supervision in macOS because it is MDM enforced. You will go through Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager to enforce the MDM settings, and as you enforce this, it helps the operating system know that it's a corporately owned device or institutionally owned device. Let's look at a few of the actions that Apple has already introduced to the MDM protocol. Supervision is enforced through the enrollment, and you can see those settings within the Jamf Pro screenshots here, where you are allowing MDM profile removal or not. Basically, do you want to enforce that the end user is allowed to remove that profile or remove that management off the device? You also have on the right-hand side additional settings when it is a supervised macOS device, like downloading updates and then download and install updates. Two very different topics, but the first being downloading updates so that you are telling that macOS device, wherever it might be, to download the updates for macOS and pinned installation until the user is ready. Possibly can restart later as well. The second option, download and install the macOS updates and enforce application of those updates immediately on the device. Another good recommendation from a security perspective so that you can patch those vulnerabilities as soon as possible. Another supervision action, enabling Apple Remote Desktop. If that device, especially in today's world, is at a home office or in a remote office, and you need to be granted access using Apple's Remote Desktop tool, you need to be able to remotely enable or disable that agent on the device. This can only be done through supervision. We do expect more to come from this. So please understand that this is something that either needs to be tested and deployed in your environment as soon as possible. As you look into different methods of applying configuration profiles and/or scripts, reviewing supervision, Aaron's recommendation through all of this is look at an organizational evaluation of how you're going to successfully accomplish a security benchmark in your environment. Therefore, look at all of it as we've discussed earlier. Review those settings, audit them, review how to apply them to your end users, and even get to the point of applying them to a test group of end users, and then evaluate, does it impact the end user experience and performance? If it does, let's go back and do some more organizational evaluation of those settings. Once you've settled on exactly what you need and how you need it, we suggest you then enforce the remediation. One of the biggest asks that we've had is, can this be automated? Can we have some tools that help us with automating the audits, the auditing and the remediation? Well, that's where Erin and her team has been successful in placing into our GitHub. So you can see the link there, github.com/Jamf. You will find the resources needed for the CIS security benchmark and applying those settings. We do recognize that we only have macOS 10.13 there today. CIS has done an incredible job of getting their security benchmarks up to date recently with 10.14 and 10.15 release. We have just now started the process of updating all of our scripts, configuration profiles, policies, and extension attributes for Jamf Pro so that those settings for those benchmarks can be automated as well. So please be on the lookout on our GitHub page for any updates that we have for those security benchmarks. You might be asking, how do we apply them? So we have 3 different policies as part of that GitHub repo. You have your first, setting your organizational priorities. Basically, define which of the settings in the security benchmark do you want to apply to your environment. Then you'll have an audit script that will go over all of your macOS devices and check for compliance against your organizational priorities. Last of all, the last action of security remediation is done so that you can take action and response on the device. Now, how can you be prepared for auditors? As we all know, auditors thoroughly enjoy reports because these reports are going to be showing them that you all have made best effort to ensure that the sensitive data is secured and exfiltration has limited possibilities. That's the goal of these reports, but how do you get those reports? We have 2 different methods of applying and obtaining reports. If you're using Jamf Pro, we have the ability through advanced computer searches to create your own customized report that shows what Macs are out of compliance. You create the customized columns of data and then have these reports automatically sent to you via email per your frequency, whether it be daily, weekly, or monthly. Jamf Pro can automate that. We also have our new product of Jamf Protect. Jamf Protect will show you a wonderful dashboard of all of the different Macs in your population and whether or not they meet compliance against the CIS security benchmark. And that can be printed out as a report so that it can show your auditors a quick glance view of what you are looking at for the settings that you have enabled in the benchmark itself. We're also thankful to state that we have received the CIS certification on the Jamf Protect product. As you utilize Jamf Protect, you are ensured that this product aligns with the CIS benchmark scores and practices that they have. I would also like to note, Michelle Peterson is also here as a panelist for this particular webinar that is from CIS. She's one of the product owners for the CIS security benchmarks. So please, if you happen to have any questions about the CIS benchmarks or even the certification itself, please post your questions in the webinar itself, and she will also have the ability to answer them. So let's do a quick recap before we get to our question and answer session. During the last 24 minutes, we've talked about why do the security benchmarks exist: to protect your sensitive data that you have in your environment. Those best practices to meet those benchmarks. So whether it be the utilization of supervision through Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager, we highly recommend the use of MDM and MDM configuration profiles. It helps ensure the future of your settings as macOS continues to get updated yearly. Workflows to applying those security settings. So we've provided different methods, whether it be through, again, supervision, configuration profiles. And we also talked about our GitHub repo of making sure you have resources to be successful through also scripting methods. And also how to be prepared for auditors through the reports that we can give you in Jamf Pro and our other security solution of Jamf Protect. Do we at Jamf have additional resources for you? Yes, absolutely. As you're aware, in our current environment, we do have professional services, but it's only for remote sessions. We are not doing on-location delivery of our professional services engagements, but we can assist you as you are weaving through security benchmarks and which one to apply. Please be aware our professional services team is very well versed in applying these security benchmarks across your organization through remote sessions that we have available. We also have training on how to use our products, even certifications. We also have US-based support that is assisting our Americas region through Eau Claire, Wisconsin, that have experts available on the Apple platform for understanding the best case scenario for implementing security benchmarks. As mentioned before, we want to instill this idea that jamfnation.com is a wonderful resource for you to ask additional questions after this webinar is done. So thank you so much for listening today. Please scan this QR code if you would like to get in contact with us, and thank you for joining our webinar.